A single whispered warning, "Don't talk," from a scarred Marine veteran to a police chief at a quiet steakhouse dinner would save dozens of lives and expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of law enforcement. What started as a father's promise to his daughter for a birthday dinner became a deadly ambush that would change 3 lives forever. Stay with me until the end of this incredible true story and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels across America. The windshield wipers of Aaron Brooks' weathered Chevy Silverado fought a losing battle against the October rain as he pulled into the gravel parking lot of Cedar Steakhouse. The neon sign flickered intermittently, casting red shadows across the puddles that had formed in the uneven asphalt. Through the passenger window, 8-year-old Bella pressed her small palm against the glass, her breath fogging the surface as she peered at the warm glow emanating from the restaurant's windows. "Daddy, are you sure we can afford this?" she asked, her voice carrying that peculiar mixture of childhood excitement and premature wisdom that broke Aaron's heart every single time. Aaron turned off the engine and sat in the sudden silence, listening to the rain drum against the metal roof. His calloused hands remained wrapped around the steering wheel as he studied his daughter's reflection in the window. At 8 years old, Bella possessed an intuitive understanding of their financial struggles that no child should carry. Since Sarah's death 3 years ago, every dollar had been counted, every expense weighed against necessity. "Today's special, sweetheart," he said, turning to face her fully. "Remember what today is." Bella's face lit up like the 4th of July. "My birthday." "That's right, and what did Daddy promise you for your 8th birthday?" "Dinner at a real restaurant." She practically bounced in her seat, her dark curls so much like her mother's dancing around her shoulders. "With cloth napkins and everything." Aaron smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. At 34, he carried the weight of too many battles, both foreign and domestic. 3 tours in Afghanistan had left their mark in the scar that ran from his left temple to his jawline, and in the way his gray eyes constantly scanned for threats that most civilians would never notice. But when Bella smiled, all of that fell away, and he remembered why he'd fought so hard to come home. "With cloth napkins and everything," he confirmed, reaching over to tuck a wayward curl behind her ear. "But we need to talk about restaurant rules, okay?" Bella nodded solemnly, recognizing the shift in her father's tone. This was Marine Dad talking now, not birthday Dad. "Inside voices only. Please and thank you for everything. No asking for dessert unless they offer it. And if Daddy tells you to do something, I do it right away, no questions." Bella finished, having heard this particular lecture many times before. "I know, Daddy. I'll be good." "You're always good, baby girl." "That's not what this is about." Aaron's voice softened as he reached into the back seat for their jackets. "Sometimes grown-ups need to handle grown-up things, and when that happens, your job is to listen to Daddy. Can you do that for me?" "Always," Bella said, and the fierce loyalty in her young voice reminded Aaron so much of Sarah that it physically hurt. They stepped out into the rain, Aaron immediately moving to Bella's side to shield her from the worst of the downpour. The parking lot was nearly full, unusual for a Tuesday night in their small Colorado town of Pine Ridge. Aaron's eyes automatically cataloged the vehicles, mostly pickup trucks and sedans. Nothing that screamed danger, but his instincts had kept him alive through 3 combat deployments. He'd learned long ago to trust the feeling in his gut, and tonight something felt off. The warmth of Cedar Steakhouse enveloped them as they stepped through the heavy wooden doors. The interior was exactly what Aaron had hoped for Bella's special night, rustic elegance without pretension. Exposed wooden beams stretched across the ceiling, and a massive stone fireplace dominated the far wall, its flames casting dancing shadows across the dining room. The scent of grilled meat and wood smoke filled the air, making Aaron's mouth water despite his unease. "Welcome to Cedar Steakhouse," said the hostess, a young woman with kind eyes and a genuine smile. "Just the 2 of you tonight?" "Yes, ma'am," Aaron replied, his hand resting protectively on Bella's shoulder. "We'd like something quiet if possible." The hostess glanced down at Bella, taking in the carefully brushed curls and the dress that Aaron had ironed 3 times to get the wrinkles just right. "Special occasion." "It's my birthday," Bella announced, unable to contain her excitement any longer. "Well, happy birthday, sweetheart. How old are you today?" 8. 8 years old. My goodness, you're practically grown up. The hostess winked at Aaron. I think I have the perfect table for a birthday celebration. Right this way. She led them through the dining room past tables filled with couples and families enjoying their evening meals. Aaron's trained eye swept the room, automatically noting exits potential cover the positions of other diners. It was a habit he couldn't break even in the safest of environments. Especially in the safest of environments, complacency killed more soldiers than enemy fire ever had. Their table was positioned along the east wall, giving Aaron a clear view of both the main entrance and the kitchen doors. Perfect tactical positioning, though he didn't think the young hostess had arranged it intentionally. As they settled into their seats, Bella reached across the table to touch the burgundy cloth napkin with reverent fingers. "It's so fancy, Daddy," she whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "You deserve fancy," Aaron said, meaning every word. "You deserve all the fancy things in the world." Their waitress approached an older woman named Dorothy, according to her name tag, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, and the kind of maternal warmth that reminded Aaron of his own grandmother. "Good evening, folks. What can I start you off with to drink?" "Chocolate milk," Bella said immediately, then caught herself. "Please, may I have chocolate milk?" "Of course you may, birthday girl. And for you, sir, coffee black, thank you." As Dorothy headed toward the kitchen, Aaron allowed himself to relax slightly. This was exactly what Bella needed: normalcy, celebration. The kind of childhood memory that would stick with her long after the difficulties of their current situation had faded. He'd been saving for months for this dinner setting, aside $5 or $10 whenever he could from his salary at the auto repair shop. It wasn't much, but it was enough for one perfect evening. "Daddy, look at all the pictures on the walls," Bella said, twisting in her chair to examine the collection of vintage photographs that decorated the restaurant. "Is that from the old days?" Aaron followed her gaze to a series of black and white photographs showing Pine Ridge's history miners from the 1880s. The railroad's arrival in 1902, the construction of the town's first school. "Those are from before your great-grandparents were even born," he explained. "Pine Ridge used to be a mining town. People came here looking for silver and gold. Did they find any? Some. Not enough to make anyone rich, but enough to build a town. That's why we have all these old buildings downtown." Bella nodded thoughtfully, always eager to learn new things. She was reading at a 5th grade level, already devouring books faster than Aaron could afford to buy them. The local librarian, Mrs. Henderson, had become their unofficial benefactor, always seeming to have damaged books that needed a good home whenever Bella finished her latest stack. Dorothy returned with their drinks, setting down Bella's chocolate milk in a tall glass with a striped straw and Aaron's coffee in a heavy ceramic mug. "Have you folks had a chance to look at the menu?" Aaron glanced at the laminated pages, his heart sinking slightly at the prices. He'd known it would be expensive, but seeing the numbers in black and white was still a shock. The cheapest steak was $28. Add Bella's kids' meal and drinks, and they were looking at nearly $50 more than he usually spent on groceries in a week. But this was Bella's birthday. This was the promise he'd made to her 6 months ago when she'd asked why they never went to fancy restaurants like other families. This was about more than food. It was about showing his daughter that she mattered, that she was worth celebrating, that their reduced circumstances didn't define her value. "I think we need a few more minutes," Aaron said, though he was really buying time to figure out how to make this work. "Take all the time you need. I'll check back in a bit." As Dorothy walked away, Aaron pretended to study the menu while doing quick calculations in his head. If he ordered just a side salad and let Bella have the kids' steak dinner, they might stay under $40. He wasn't particularly hungry anyway. Nerves and anticipation had killed his appetite. "What are you going to get, Daddy?" Bella asked, her own menu spread open in front of her, though Aaron knew she was probably just looking at the pictures. "I'm still deciding. What about you, birthday girl?" "The kids' steak with French fries," she said without hesitation. "And maybe we could share a dessert if it's not too expensive." Aaron's chest tightened. Even on her birthday, even in the middle of what was supposed to be pure celebration, Bella was worried about money. She was 8 years old and worried about the cost of dessert at her own birthday dinner. The unfairness of it all hit him like a physical blow. "You can have whatever dessert you want," he said firmly. "This is your special day." Bella's smile could have powered the entire restaurant. Really? Really? In fact, I think we should order dessert first, just to make sure we save room for it. She giggled, the sound like music in the warm dining room. That's silly, Daddy. Sometimes silly is exactly what we need. As if summoned by their laughter, Dorothy reappeared at their table. Ready to order. Ladies first, Aaron said, nodding to Bella. I'd like the kids' steak dinner with French fries, please. And, she glanced at Aaron for confirmation, and we're going to order dessert first. Dorothy laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Well, that's the best idea I've heard all night. What kind of dessert are we talking about? What do you have? Bella asked, bouncing slightly in her chair. Let's see. We've got chocolate cake, apple pie, ice cream sundaes, and tonight's special is fresh strawberry shortcake. Strawberry shortcake, Bella said immediately. Mommy loved strawberries. The casual mention of Sarah hit Aaron like it always did, unexpected and devastating. Bella spoke about her mother with the matter-of-fact acceptance that children brought to even the most painful realities. But Aaron still struggled with the raw grief that followed any mention of his late wife. Strawberry shortcake sounds perfect, he managed. And for dinner, she'll have the kids' steak medium with fries. I'll just have the house salad. Dorothy's experienced eye took in Aaron's worn jeans and carefully pressed shirt, the way he'd quickly scanned the prices, the slight tension around his eyes when he'd ordered just a salad. She'd been waiting tables for 30 years and had developed a sixth sense about family situations. You know what? She said conversationally. Our cook made way too much prime rib tonight, and we hate to see good food go to waste. Would you mind helping us out by trying our prime rib dinner? No charge, of course, you'd actually be doing us a favor. Aaron started to protest his pride, bristling at what was obviously charity, but Dorothy held up a hand. I'm serious as a heart attack, she said. Miguel gets cranky when we have to throw away perfectly good meat, and you look like a man who'd appreciate a well-cooked prime rib. Besides, she winked at Bella, it's not every day we get to serve dinner to such a distinguished birthday girl. Bella looked up at Aaron with wide, hopeful eyes, and his resistance crumbled. Sometimes pride was a luxury he couldn't afford, especially when it meant disappointing his daughter. That's very kind of you, he said quietly. Thank you. Don't mention it. I'll get these orders in right away. As Dorothy headed back to the kitchen, Aaron reached across the table to squeeze Bella's hand. What do you think so far, birthday girl? I think this is the best birthday ever, she said solemnly. Even better than the year Mommy made the princess cake. Aaron remembered that cake, 3 layers of pink and purple with enough sugar flowers to stock a garden center. Sarah had worked on it for hours, determined to create something magical for Bella's 5th birthday. It had been their last birthday together as a complete family. Sarah had been diagnosed with cancer just 2 months later. Mommy would be proud of how grown up you're being tonight, Aaron said. She always said you had the best manners of any kid she knew. Do you think she can see us? Bella asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Do you think she knows it's my birthday? Aaron's throat tightened. These were the moments that tested every parenting skill he'd never learned, the questions that required wisdom he wasn't sure he possessed. How do you explain death to a child who still believed in magic? How do you provide comfort when you're drowning in your own grief? I think Mommy sees everything important, he said carefully. And your birthday is definitely important. Bella nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. Children had an amazing capacity for accepting the incomprehensible, for finding peace in partial explanations that would leave adults lying awake at night. The dining room had filled up while they talked, and Aaron found himself automatically cataloging the new arrivals. A young couple on what looked like a first date, nervous energy crackling between them. An older man, dining alone, reading a paperback novel between bites of his meal. A family with 3 rambunctious boys who were testing their mother's patience and everyone else's eardrums. And then Aaron's gaze landed on a table near the fireplace, and his blood turned cold. Police Chief Claire Anderson sat with her back to the wall, her auburn hair catching the light from the flames. She was alone, which was unusual enough. Aaron had never seen the chief anywhere without at least one member of her security detail. But what made his stomach clench with sudden dread were the two men seated at separate tables, both with clear sightlines to the chief's position. Aaron had spent enough time in hostile territory to recognize the surveillance setup when he saw one. The men were trying to look casual, but their positioning was too precise, their attention too focused. One sat near the kitchen entrance, the other by the front door. Classic crossfire positioning. His military training kicked in, adrenaline flooding his system as he forced himself to remain calm. Don't look directly at them. Don't do anything that might alert them to your awareness. Assess the threat. Identify the exits. Protect the principal, in this case, Bella. "Daddy?" Bella's voice seemed to come from very far away. "You look funny. Are you okay?" Aaron forced his attention back to his daughter, painting a smile on his face that felt like it might crack. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about work stuff." But he wasn't fine. Every instinct he'd developed over 3 combat deployments was screaming that something was very wrong. The men weren't eating their food. Both plates sat virtually untouched. They weren't talking to each other, but Aaron caught subtle glances between them. Most telling of all, neither had removed their jackets despite the warmth of the restaurant. Concealed weapons. Had to be. Aaron's mind raced through possibilities. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe his hypervigilance was creating threats where none existed. Maybe 3 years of civilian life hadn't been enough to dial down his combat instincts. But then the man near the kitchen entrance reached for his water glass, and his jacket fell open just enough for Aaron to catch a glimpse of black metal. The distinctive shape of a pistol grip confirmed his worst fears. They were here to kill Chief Anderson. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He thought of his daughter sitting across from him in her birthday dress, excited about strawberry shortcake and fancy napkins. He thought of the other families in the restaurant, completely unaware that they were sitting in what might become a war zone within minutes. He thought of Chief Anderson, who had personally delivered the news of Sarah's death when Aaron had been unreachable during a particularly dark period of his grief. She'd sat in his living room for 2 hours, helping Bella understand why Daddy was crying, making sure they had everything they needed. She'd checked on them regularly in the months that followed, never in an official capacity, just as one human being looking out for another. Aaron couldn't let her die. Not here, not tonight, not in front of his daughter. But he also couldn't risk Bella's safety. The thought of his daughter being caught in crossfire of her witnessing violence on what should be the happiest night of her year was unbearable. "Bella," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "I need you to do something for me." She looked up from her chocolate milk, immediately sensing the change in his tone. "What, Daddy?" "Remember what we talked about in the truck, about listening to Daddy when grown-up things need to happen?" Bella nodded, her dark eyes growing serious. "I need you to go to the bathroom, right now, and I need you to stay there until I come get you, no matter what you hear. Can you do that for me?" "But Daddy." "No questions, baby girl. Please. This is one of those times when Daddy needs you to trust him completely." The fear in Aaron's voice must have gotten through to her, because Bella slid out of her chair without another word. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too. More than all the stars in the sky. Now go." Aaron watched his daughter walk toward the back of the restaurant, her small figure disappearing around the corner toward the restrooms. Only then did he allow himself to fully assess the situation. Chief Anderson was cutting into her steak, completely unaware of the danger. The 2 surveillance men were getting restless. Aaron could see it in their body language, the way they kept checking their watches, the subtle tension in their shoulders. Whatever they were waiting for, it was going to happen soon. Aaron needed to warn the chief, but he couldn't just walk over to her table. That would alert the gunmen and potentially trigger the attack before he could get civilians to safety. He needed to be subtle, strategic. He stood up slowly, as if heading to check on Bella, and began walking toward the chief's table. His path would take him past the man stationed near the kitchen entrance, but there was no helping that. He just had to hope the gunman wouldn't see him as a threat. As he approached Chief Anderson's table, Aaron caught her eye and smiled politely. To anyone watching, it would look like simple recognition between 2 residents of a small town. But when he reached her table, he leaned down slightly, as if to say hello. Instead, he whispered two words that would change everything. Don't talk. Chief Anderson's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Her training kicked in immediately. She didn't turn to look around, didn't show any outward sign of alarm. But Aaron saw the subtle shift in her posture, the way her free hand dropped casually toward her hip, where her service weapon waited beneath her jacket. How many? She asked quietly, her lips barely moving. 2 visible. Kitchen entrance and front door. Unknown weapons, but armed. Civilians. Aaron's heart clenched as he thought of all the innocent families, the children, the elderly couples enjoying their evening meals. 40, maybe 50 people. Chief Anderson set down her fork with deliberate calm and reached for her napkin, using the motion to scan the room without appearing to do so. Her years of law enforcement training were evident in the way she processed the information assessed. The threat began formulating a response. Your daughter, she asked. Safe. Bathroom. Good. She paused, her mind clearly racing through tactical options. On my signal, get behind the bar. Can you handle yourself if this goes sideways? Aaron almost smiled at the question. 3 tours Afghanistan, Marine infantry. Something like relief flickered in the chief's eyes. Thank God. We're going to need all the help we can get. At that moment, as if triggered by some invisible signal, both gunmen began to move. The man near the kitchen entrance stood up, his hand moving toward his jacket. The man by the front door did the same, and suddenly Aaron could see the cold calculation in their eyes, the professional detachment that marked them as experienced killers. Now, Chief Anderson said quietly. Aaron was already moving his body, remembering the training that had kept him alive in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. He dove toward the bar just as the first shots rang out, the sound of suppressed weapons cutting through the warm atmosphere of the restaurant like a knife through silk. Behind him, he heard Chief Anderson's voice cutting through the sudden chaos. Pine Ridge Police, everyone get down now. The peaceful birthday dinner had just become a battlefield. And in the bathroom at the back of the restaurant, 8-year-old Bella Brooks pressed her hands over her ears and tried not to cry, trusting that her daddy would come for her just like he always did. The real fight was just beginning. The first suppressed gunshot shattered the illusion of safety like glass hitting concrete. Aaron's body hit the floor behind the mahogany bar just as the second shot splintered the wood where his head had been moments before. Around him, the restaurant exploded into chaos, screams piercing the air, chairs scraping against hardwood as people dove for cover, the crash of breaking dishes as panicked diners overturned tables. Chief Anderson had drawn her service weapon in one fluid motion, her years of training taking over as she rolled behind an overturned table. Pine Ridge Police, drop your weapons, she shouted, but her words were lost in the cacophony of terror that had consumed Cedar Steakhouse. Aaron's mind shifted into combat mode, the familiar clarity that had kept him alive in Kandahar and Helmand Province flooding his system. Time seemed to slow as his enhanced awareness cataloged every detail, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with the wood smoke from the fireplace, the way the gunman near the kitchen moved with military precision, the sound of breaking glass as a stray bullet shattered a vintage photograph of old Pine Ridge. The shooter by the front entrance was advancing toward Chief Anderson's position, his suppressed pistol tracking smoothly as he moved. Professional. Methodical. This wasn't some random act of violence. This was an execution attempt by people who knew exactly what they were doing. Aaron peered around the edge of the bar, his eyes searching for makeshift weapons. Behind the polished wood surface, bottles of wine and liquor stood in neat rows like glass soldiers. He grabbed a heavy bottle of bourbon, its weight familiar and reassuring in his palm. Not ideal, but it would have to do. Daddy! The voice cut through the chaos like a blade through his heart. Bella stood in the entrance to the hallway leading to the bathrooms, her small frame silhouetted against the warm light, her birthday dress a splash of pink in the midst of the nightmare. Get back! Aaron roared, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had commanded Marines under fire. Stay in the bathroom. But it was too late. The gunman near the kitchen had spotted her, and Aaron watched in horror as the black barrel of the suppressed pistol began to swing in his daughter's direction. In that moment, every tactical consideration disappeared. There was no mission, no strategy, no careful planning. There was only a father who would die before letting harm come to his child. Aaron launched himself from behind the bar like a man possessed the bourbon bottle, leaving his hand in a perfect arc that caught the gunman in the temple. The impact sent the shooter staggering, his shot going wide and punching a hole in the wall inches from where Bella stood frozen in terror. "Run, baby, run," Aaron screamed as he tackled the disoriented gunman, both men crashing into a table laden with someone's abandoned dinner. Plates shattered beneath them as they rolled across the floor, fighting for control of the weapon. The gunman was good. Aaron could feel the professional training in the way he moved, the calculated violence of someone who had killed before. But Aaron had been fighting for his life since he was 18 years old, and tonight he was fighting for something more precious than his own survival. They slammed into the stone base of the fireplace, the impact driving the air from Aaron's lungs. The gunman's elbow caught him in the ribs, sending lightning bolts of pain through his chest. But Aaron held on, his fingers locked around the man's wrist, keeping the pistol pointed away from the screaming civilians. Across the restaurant, Chief Anderson was engaged in her own deadly dance with the second shooter. She moved like a trained professional, using overturned tables and support pillars for cover as she maneuvered for a clear shot. But the gunman was keeping her pinned down, his steady fire forcing her to stay defensive, while his partner dealt with the unexpected complication that Aaron had become. "Dorothy, get everyone out the back," Anderson shouted to the waitress, who was crouched behind the service station with tears streaming down her face. "Emergency exit, move." The older woman nodded frantically and began herding terrified diners toward the kitchen and the emergency exit beyond. Families crawled on hands and knees between overturned tables, parents shielding their children with their own bodies, elderly couples helping each other navigate the obstacle course that the dining room had become. Aaron managed to drive his knee into his opponent's solar plexus, causing the man to double over and loosen his grip on the pistol. For a split second, Aaron thought he had won. Then he saw the knife appearing from the gunman's boot, its blade gleaming orange in the firelight. The steel came up in a vicious arc aimed at Aaron's throat. He threw himself backward, the razor-sharp edge missing his jugular by millimeters, and scrambled to his feet. The gunman was already rising, the knife held in a professional fighting grip that told Aaron this man had been trained to kill with more than just firearms. "You picked the wrong night, hero." The gunman snarled, his voice carrying a slight accent that Aaron couldn't quite place. "Should have minded your own business." "My business is protecting people," Aaron replied, circling warily as he searched for anything he could use as a weapon, especially from cowards who target women in restaurants. The insult had the desired effect. The gunman's face darkened with rage and he lunged forward with the blade extended. Aaron sidestepped and grabbed a heavy wooden chair, swinging it in a wide arc that caught the assassin across the shoulder and sent him stumbling into the bar. Meanwhile, Chief Anderson had managed to work her way closer to the second gunman, using the chaos and the steady stream of evacuating civilians as cover. She could see him now through the gaps between overturned tables, a thin man with prematurely gray hair and the cold eyes of a professional killer. He was methodically working his way toward where she had last been positioned, confident that his partner would handle any interference. He was wrong. Anderson rose from behind a table like an avenging angel, her service weapon steady in a perfect Weaver stance. "Pine Ridge Police, drop your weapon." The gunman spun toward her voice, his suppressed pistol coming up with practiced speed. For a moment that lasted an eternity, they faced each other across the destroyed dining room. Two professionals who understood that only one of them would walk away from this confrontation. The gunman's weapon was almost level when Anderson fired. The crack of her .40 caliber service pistol was deafening after the muffled pops of the suppressed weapons. The bullet caught the assassin's center mass, spinning him around and sending him crashing into the wall beneath a collection of vintage mining photographs. He slid down the wood paneling, leaving a crimson smear, his weapon clattering across the hardwood floor. But Anderson's victory was short-lived. Even as the second gunman fell, she could see Aaron still locked in mortal combat with the first assassin, and her heart sank as she realized the Marine veteran was fighting for his life with nothing but his bare hands against a trained killer with a blade. Aaron feinted left, then dove right, as the knife sliced through the air where his head had been. He came up with a broken chair leg in his hands, the jagged wood providing him with a weapon that could at least keep his opponent at a distance. They circled each other like gladiators in an arena of overturned furniture and broken glass. "Aaron," Chief Anderson called out, trying to get a clear shot, but the two men were too close together, moving too fast. Any shot she took would risk hitting the man who had saved her life. The gunman pressed his attack, the knife weaving hypnotic patterns in the air as he advanced. He was skilled. Aaron had to give him that. The blade work spoke of military training, special forces perhaps, or maybe just years of killing for money. But Aaron had learned to fight in places where losing meant death, and he had promised his daughter he would come back to her. He would not break that promise tonight. When the knife came in low, aiming for his kidney, Aaron trapped the gunman's wrist with the chair leg and drove his elbow up into the man's nose. Cartilage crunched under the impact and blood sprayed across Aaron's shirt. The assassin staggered back, temporarily blinded by tears and pain, and Aaron pressed his advantage. The broken chair leg caught the gunman across the temple with a sound like a baseball bat hitting a fastball. The assassin's eyes rolled back and he crumpled to the floor among the wreckage of what had been someone's romantic dinner for two. For a moment, the restaurant fell silent except for the crackling of the fire and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Aaron stood over his fallen opponent, breathing hard, his hands shaking with adrenaline and delayed shock. Around him, the warm sanctuary where he had planned to celebrate his daughter's birthday looked like a war zone. "Daddy!" Bella's voice snapped him back to reality. She was running toward him across the debris-strewn floor, her birthday dress torn and stained, tears streaming down her face. Aaron dropped the bloody chair leg and opened his arms, catching his daughter as she launched herself at him with the desperation of a child who had thought she might never see her father again. "I'm sorry, baby," he whispered into her hair, his own voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry you had to see this." "I was scared," she sobbed against his chest. "I thought the bad men were going to hurt you." "Shh, it's okay now. Daddy's here, Daddy's got you." Chief Anderson approached them slowly, her weapon holstered but her hand still resting on the grip. Her auburn hair had come loose from its careful styling, and there was a cut on her cheek from flying glass, but her green eyes were steady and professional as she surveyed the aftermath of the attack. "Is she hurt?" Anderson asked, nodding toward Bella. "I don't think so," Aaron said, running his hands over his daughter's small form, checking for injuries. "Just scared." "She should be. We all should be." Anderson's voice was grim as she looked at the two unconscious gunmen. "This wasn't random, Aaron. This was planned, professional. Someone wanted me dead badly enough to risk attacking me in a public place." Aaron looked up at her, still holding Bella tightly against his chest. "Any idea who?" "Too many possibilities," Anderson admitted. "When you've been in law enforcement as long as I have, you make enemies. But this level of sophistication, the military-style precision, this is something bigger than a grudge." The sound of sirens was getting closer now, and Anderson could see the flash of red and blue lights through the restaurant's front windows. In moments, Cedar Steakhouse would be crawling with police officers, paramedics, and crime scene technicians. The quiet investigation she preferred would be impossible. "Aaron," she said quietly, her voice urgent, "before my people get here, I need to ask you something. What you did tonight, taking on armed assassins to protect civilians that took training, real training. How much combat experience do you have?" "3 tours in Afghanistan," Aaron replied, still swaying slightly with Bella in his arms, the motion automatic and soothing. "Marine infantry. I've seen my share of firefights." "I thought so. The way you move, the tactical awareness that doesn't come from weekend warrior training." Anderson paused, clearly wrestling with a decision. "I'm going to need your help." Aaron looked at her sharply. "What kind of help?" "The kind that keeps you and Bella safe. Because whoever sent these men isn't going to be happy that their assassination attempt failed. And they're going to want to know who interfered with their operation." The implications of her words hit Aaron like a sledgehammer. By saving Chief Anderson's life, he had painted a target on his own back, and worse, on Bella's. The men who had planned this attack would come looking for the Good Samaritan who had ruined their carefully orchestrated hit. "What are you saying?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "I'm saying that as of tonight, you and your daughter are in danger, real danger. The kind that doesn't go away when the news cycle moves on to the next story. Anderson's voice was gentle but implacable. But I'm also saying that I can protect you. Both of you. If you're willing to help me figure out who's behind this. Aaron looked down at Bella, who had finally stopped crying and was listening to their conversation with the intensity that children brought to adult discussions they didn't fully understand, but knew were important. Her birthday dress was ruined. Her special night destroyed her innocence, shattered by violence that no 8-year-old should ever witness. But she was alive. They were both alive. And Chief Anderson was right. The men behind tonight's attack would want revenge for their failure. What kind of help are you talking about? Aaron asked. The kind that uses your military skills and my law enforcement resources to track down whoever wants me dead before they try again. The kind that keeps your daughter safe while we figure out who we're really fighting. Before Aaron could respond, the front doors of Cedar Steakhouse burst open, and a flood of police officers poured in, weapons drawn, shouting commands into the chaos. Paramedics followed close behind their medical kits, already open, as they began triaging the wounded. In the midst of the controlled chaos that followed any officer-involved shooting, Aaron found himself separated from Chief Anderson as detectives began taking statements and crime scene photographers documented every bullet hole and bloodstain. Bella clung to his hand with desperate strength, overwhelmed by the noise and activity swirling around them. "Sir, I'm Detective Maria Santos," said a young Latina woman with kind eyes and a badge hanging from a chain around her neck. "I need to get your statement about what happened here tonight." Aaron nodded, but his eyes kept finding Chief Anderson across the room as she spoke in urgent, hushed tones with a graying man in an expensive suit who had arrived with the second wave of law enforcement. Even from a distance, Aaron could see the tension in their body language, the way Anderson kept glancing in his direction. "Daddy," Bella whispered, tugging on his shirt. "Are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart," Aaron said, though he wasn't entirely sure it was true. "We're not in trouble. We helped stop the bad guys." "But why do the police want to talk to us?" Detective Santos knelt down to Bella's eye level, her voice gentle and reassuring. "Hi there, sweetheart. What's your name?" "Bella Brooks," Bella replied in a small voice. "Today's my birthday." "Happy birthday, Bella. I know this has been scary, but you and your daddy were very brave tonight. We just need to ask some questions so we can make sure the bad guys can't hurt anyone else. Is that okay?" Bella nodded, though she pressed closer to Aaron's side. The detective led them to a quiet corner of the restaurant where someone had set up a makeshift interview area away from the worst of the crime scene activity. For the next hour, Aaron recounted the events of the evening in careful detail, from the moment he first noticed the suspicious men to the final confrontation near the fireplace. Detective Santos was thorough but gentle, especially when it came to Bella's part of the story. "You did exactly the right thing," she told Aaron when he finished. "If you hadn't warned Chief Anderson when you did, we'd probably be looking at multiple homicides instead of 2 suspects in custody." "Are they talking?" Aaron asked. "The shooters." Santos shook her head. "Lawyered up the moment they regained consciousness. Professional criminals by the look of it. No identification weapons, with serial numbers filed off prepaid cell phones with no call history. Whoever hired them knew what they were doing." Aaron's blood ran cold. Professional assassins meant professional people behind the contract, the kind of people with resources, connections, and the patience to plan their revenge carefully. "Detective Santos." Chief Anderson's voice cut through his dark thoughts. She approached their table with the gray-haired man in the expensive suit trailing behind her. "How are our witnesses holding up?" "They're cooperating fully," Santos replied. "Mr. Brooks here probably saved your life, Chief." "I know. That's why I need to speak with him privately." Anderson looked meaningfully at the other detective. "Could you give us a moment?" Santos nodded and excused herself, taking Bella to the restaurant's small gift shop where one of the officers was helping her pick out a stuffed animal to replace the birthday celebration that had been destroyed by violence. When they were alone, Chief Anderson sat down across from Aaron, her expression grave. "Aaron, I want you to meet Deputy District Attorney Marcus Webb. Marcus, this is Aaron Brooks, the man I told you about." Webb extended his hand, his grip firm, and his eyes sharp with intelligence. "Mr. Brooks, Chief Anderson has been telling me about your background and what happened here tonight. We have a situation that requires some unconventional thinking." "What kind of situation?" Aaron asked, though he suspected he already knew. "The kind where good citizens who try to help law enforcement end up dead in car accidents or home invasion robberies," Webb said bluntly. "The men who tried to kill Chief Anderson tonight were professionals. That means they were hired by people with serious money and serious reach." Aaron felt his stomach clench. How serious? Serious enough to stage a military-style assassination attempt in a public restaurant. Serious enough to use shooters with no criminal history that we can trace. Serious enough to risk exposure for a chance at removing Chief Anderson permanently. "Why Chief Anderson?" Aaron asked, looking at the woman who had sat in his living room 3 years ago helping his daughter understand grief. What's she done that would make someone want her dead? Anderson and Webb exchanged a look that spoke of shared knowledge and mutual concern. Finally, Anderson spoke. 6 months ago, we broke up a drug trafficking operation that was moving product through Pine Ridge. Big operation, millions of dollars in methamphetamine and fentanyl coming up from Mexico through Colorado and on to Chicago and Detroit. "That's good police work," Aaron said. "Why would that put you in danger?" "Because the operation had help," Webb interjected. "Inside help. Someone in law enforcement was providing protection, tipping off dealers about raids making evidence disappear. We never figured out who, but we cost some very dangerous people a lot of money." "And now they want revenge," Aaron concluded. "More than revenge," Anderson said. "They want to send a message. Kill the police chief who disrupted their operation and do it publicly enough that other law enforcement agencies think twice before interfering with their business." Aaron looked across the destroyed restaurant to where Bella was holding a stuffed bear that one of the officers had bought for her, her young face still pale with shock and confusion. His daughter had been seconds away from being caught in the crossfire of a professional assassination. The thought made him physically ill. "What do you want from me?" he asked quietly. "Your help," Anderson said. "Your military experience, your tactical knowledge, most importantly, your fresh perspective. Whoever the inside man is, he's been covering his tracks for months. My own people have been investigating and coming up empty. You think it's someone in your department?" "I know it is," Anderson said grimly. "The timing of the raids that got compromised, the evidence that went missing, it had to be someone with access to operational planning and evidence storage. Someone I trusted." Webb leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Aaron, we're not just asking you to help us catch dirty cops. We're asking you to help us stay alive long enough to catch them. Because if tonight proved anything, it's that they're not going to stop until Chief Anderson is dead. And anyone who helped her," Aaron said, the full scope of his situation finally becoming clear. "Exactly, which is why we need to move fast. The people behind this are going to regroup and come at us again, probably within days. And next time they'll be ready for interference." Aaron was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. He could refuse take Bella and disappear into another state, start over with new identities, and hope the professional killers never found them. But he knew that was wishful thinking. People with the resources to stage tonight's attack had the resources to hunt down witnesses anywhere in the country. Or he could fight. Use the skills the Marine Corps had taught him to protect the woman who had helped his family through their darkest hours, and maybe keep other innocent people from dying in the crossfire. "If I help you," he said finally, "what happens to Bella? I won't put my daughter in danger." "We've already thought of that," Anderson said. "We have a safe house outside of town. 24-hour protection, rotating shifts of officers I trust absolutely. She'll be safer there than anywhere else." "I don't want to leave Daddy." Bella's voice cut through their conversation. She had returned from the gift shop and was standing behind Aaron's chair, the stuffed bear clutched tightly in her arms. Aaron turned to look at his daughter, seeing the fear and confusion in her dark eyes. She had already lost her mother. The thought of being separated from her father, even temporarily, was clearly terrifying. "It's just for a little while, baby," Aaron said gently. "Just until Daddy helps Chief Anderson catch the bad guys." "Can't I help too?" Bella asked, and despite everything that had happened, Aaron almost smiled at the earnestness in her voice. "You can help by staying safe," he told her. "That's the most important job of all." Chief Anderson knelt down beside Bella's chair, her voice warm and reassuring. "Bella, do you remember when your mommy was sick and I used to come visit you and your daddy?" Bella nodded solemnly. "Well, now some bad people want to hurt me just like the sickness hurt your mommy. But your daddy is going to help me fight them, just like the doctors tried to help your mommy. And while he's doing that, I need you to be brave and let some very nice police officers take care of you. Can you do that for me?" Bella looked from Anderson to her father, her 8-year-old mind processing concepts that no child should have to understand. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she said in a small voice. "But Daddy has to promise to come back." Aaron felt his throat tighten as he pulled his daughter into his arms. "I promise, baby girl. Daddy always comes back. Like you did from the army. Exactly like that." As Aaron held his daughter in the wreckage of what should have been her perfect birthday dinner, he made a silent vow. The people who had brought violence into his child's life, who had turned her celebration into a nightmare, would pay for what they had done. But first, he had to make sure they both lived long enough to see justice done. The hunt was about to begin. The safe house sat like a forgotten cabin from another era, nestled in the pine-covered hills 15 miles outside Pine Ridge. Aaron followed the unmarked police cruiser up the winding dirt road, his truck's headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness as Bella slept in the passenger seat, her new stuffed bear clutched against her chest. The events at Cedar Steakhouse felt like a lifetime ago, though barely 6 hours had passed since the first shots shattered their peaceful birthday dinner. Detective Maria Santos met them at the front porch, her service weapon visible but not drawn, her eyes constantly scanning the tree line that surrounded the property. "Welcome to Camp Nowhere," she said with a tired smile as Aaron gently lifted his sleeping daughter from the truck. "Not exactly the Ritz, but it's secure." The interior of this cabin was spartanly furnished but clean, with heavy curtains covering every window and what Aaron recognized as recently installed security equipment mounted discreetly in the corners. A communications setup that would have made his old unit jealous occupied one corner of the main room, multiple monitors displaying feeds from cameras positioned around the property's perimeter. "Daddy, where are we?" Bella asked drowsily as Aaron carried her inside, her voice thick with sleep and confusion. "Somewhere safe, baby girl," Aaron murmured, though his own eyes were cataloging escape routes, defensive positions, fields of fire from the windows. Old habits died hard, especially when your daughter's life depended on tactical awareness. Officer Jennifer Hayes emerged from what appeared to be the kitchen, a steaming mug of coffee in her hands, and the kind of maternal warmth that reminded Aaron painfully of Sarah. She was younger than Santos, maybe late 20s, with kind brown eyes and the sort of genuine smile that children instinctively trusted. "Hi there, sweetheart," Hayes said to Bella, kneeling down to her eye level. "I'm Jenny. I'm going to be staying here with you while your daddy helps Chief Anderson. Are you hungry? I was just making some pancakes." Bella looked questioningly at Aaron, who nodded encouragingly. "Jenny's one of the good guys, baby. She's going to take very good care of you." As Hayes led Bella toward the kitchen, chattering about pancakes and whether she preferred chocolate chips or blueberries, Santos gestured for Aaron to step outside onto the porch. The mountain air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine needles and the promise of autumn snow still weeks away. "She'll be safe here," Santos said quietly, lighting a cigarette with hands that trembled slightly. "Hayes is former military police, and we've got rotating shifts of officers I'd trust with my own kids. Electronic surveillance motion detectors, the works." Aaron nodded, but his attention was focused on the approaching headlights winding up the mountain road. Two vehicles moving fast but not recklessly. Chief Anderson's unmarked Crown Victoria led the way, followed by a black SUV that screamed federal agency. "Looks like the cavalry's arriving," Santos observed, dropping her cigarette and crushing it under her heel. Chief Anderson emerged from the Crown Vic, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually immaculate hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and her professional blazer replaced by tactical gear that spoke of serious expectations for violence. The man who stepped out of the SUV was someone Aaron didn't recognize. Tall, lean, with the sort of weathered face and watchful eyes that marked him as either law enforcement or military. "Aaron," Anderson called as she approached the porch. I want you to meet Special Agent David Chen, FBI. David, this is Aaron Brooks, the man I told you about. Chen's handshake was firm and brief, his evaluation of Aaron swift but thorough. Chief Anderson says you have extensive combat experience, Mr. Brooks. We're going to need that experience starting today. What's the situation? Aaron asked, though something in the federal agent's tone suggested it wasn't good news. The situation is that we're running out of time, Anderson replied grimly. The two shooters from last night are dead. Aaron felt his blood turn cold. Dead how? Officially suicide. They managed to fashion nooses from their bedsheets sometime during the night shift change. Chen's voice carried the flat tone of someone delivering news he didn't believe. Unofficially, someone wanted to make sure they couldn't talk. The implications hit Aaron like a sledgehammer. If the assassins could be killed while in police custody, then the corruption Chief Anderson suspected went deeper than just evidence tampering or tipped-off raids. Someone with real access, real authority had ordered those deaths. How many people knew where they were being held? Aaron asked. That's the million-dollar question, Anderson said. The arrest report, the booking information, the cell assignments, all of that goes through Central Dispatch. Could be dozens of people with access to that information. Or it could be someone with admin privileges who can access everything, Chen added. We're looking at the possibility that this corruption reaches into the highest levels of local law enforcement. Santos, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Chief, with all due respect, if someone in the department ordered those hits, how do we know who to trust? How do we know our communications aren't being monitored, our operations compromised before we even begin them? It was a valid question, and Aaron could see the weight of it settling on Anderson's shoulders. She was being asked to investigate her own people while simultaneously protecting civilians and staying alive, all while not knowing which of her officers might be working for the enemy. That's why Agent Chen is here, Anderson said finally. The FBI is taking over the federal aspects of this investigation. Drug trafficking across state lines, conspiracy to commit murder, corruption of public officials, all federal crimes. And that's why we need Mr. Brooks. Chen continued, his gaze shifting to Aaron. Fresh eyes, outside perspective, and military training that could prove invaluable if this situation escalates. When this situation escalates, Anderson corrected. Aaron, whoever is behind this, they've invested too much money and taken too many risks to just walk away because their first attempt failed. They're going to come at us again probably sooner rather than later. Aaron thought about Bella inside the cabin, probably working her way through her second helping of pancakes while Officer Hayes tried to distract her from the reality that her father was about to walk into mortal danger. The unfairness of it all, the fact that his daughter's 8th birthday had become the catalyst for a war between corrupt cops and federal agents, made him want to hit something. What do you need me to do? He asked quietly. Chen opened a tactical briefcase he'd retrieved from the SUV, revealing files, photographs, and what appeared to be surveillance equipment. We need you to help us identify the inside man. Someone in Chief Anderson's department has been feeding information to a drug trafficking organization for at least 6 months. We know this because the raids that got compromised were planned using secure channels that only department personnel should have had access to, Aaron finished. And the evidence that disappeared was being held in a facility that requires authorized access. Exactly, but it goes deeper than that. Anderson spread several photographs across the porch railing, each showing different men in what appeared to be surveillance photos. 3 weeks ago, we arrested Miguel Vasquez, a mid-level distributor for the organization we've been tracking. Vasquez was carrying enough fentanyl to put him away for 20 years, but he was also carrying this. She handed Aaron a clear evidence bag containing what appeared to be a cell phone. Burner phone, like you'd expect from a drug dealer. But the interesting thing is the contact list. Most of the numbers are what you'd expect other dealers, suppliers, customers. But one number belongs to a phone that was purchased using a Pine Ridge Police Department credit card. Aaron studied the evidence bag, his mind racing through the implications. Someone in your department was in direct communication with drug traffickers. Not just communication, Chen said grimly. According to the call logs, we were able to recover that phone was used to coordinate the timing of drug shipments with patrol schedules, to warn dealers about upcoming raids, and to arrange for evidence to be lost or corrupted. How many people in your department have access to patrol schedules and evidence storage? Aaron asked Anderson. Too many, she admitted. Shift supervisors, evidence technicians, administrative staff, senior officers. We're looking at potentially 30 or 40 people who could have provided that level of information. Santos, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. Chief, what if we're approaching this wrong? What if, instead of trying to figure out who the inside man is, we use the fact that we know there is an inside man to our advantage? All eyes turned to the young detective, who looked suddenly uncomfortable with the attention. I mean, what if we feed different information to different people and see which version gets back to the traffickers? A canary trap, Aaron said, recognizing the counterintelligence technique from his military days. Feed each suspect a slightly different piece of false information and see which version the enemy acts on. Exactly, Santos said, warming to her theme. We could create fake operational plans, false raid schedules, bogus evidence reports. Compartmentalize the information so that only specific people have access to specific versions. Chen nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. It could work, but it would require careful coordination and absolute operational security. One mistake, one leak to the wrong person, and we tip our hand. More importantly, Anderson added, it would require putting people in real danger based on false information. If we create a fake operation and the traffickers act on it, innocent people could get hurt. Aaron was about to respond when the sound of his daughter's laughter drifted out through the cabin's windows, followed by Officer Hayes' voice asking if she wanted seconds on the pancakes. The normalcy of it, a child enjoying breakfast, an adult caring for her needs, stood in stark contrast to the life and death decisions being made on the porch. We don't have a choice, Aaron said finally. These people tried to kill Chief Anderson in a restaurant full of families. They murdered 2 men in police custody to keep them from talking. They're not going to stop because we ask them nicely, and they're not going to be deterred by conventional law enforcement. What are you suggesting? Chen asked. I'm suggesting we stop playing defense and start playing offense. We use Santos's canary trap idea, but we do it smart. We create false information that draws them into a confrontation on our terms, in a place of our choosing, with civilians safely out of the way. Anderson studied Aaron's face, seeing something in his expression that reminded her of the Marine who had saved her life the night before. You're talking about setting a trap, using ourselves as bait. I'm talking about ending this before more innocent people get hurt, Aaron replied. My daughter shouldn't have to live in hiding because some corrupt cop wants to make money off drug dealers. Other families shouldn't have to worry about getting caught in crossfire every time they go out for dinner. Chen was nodding slowly, his mind clearly working through the tactical possibilities. It could work, but we'd need to be very careful about the setup. We'd need backup surveillance contingency plans for when things go wrong. When things go wrong, Santos repeated. Not if. In my experience, Aaron said quietly, things always go wrong. The trick is planning for it. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of another vehicle approaching up the mountain road. This time it was a Pine Ridge Police Department patrol car moving fast enough to kick up a cloud of dust. Anderson's hand moved instinctively toward her service weapon as the cruiser pulled to a stop near the other vehicles. Officer Mark Sullivan emerged from the patrol car, his usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious agitation. Sullivan was one of Anderson's most trusted officers, a 15-year veteran with a spotless record and a reputation for absolute reliability. Chief, Sullivan called as he approached the porch. We've got a problem, a big one. What kind of problem? Anderson asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer wouldn't be good. The kind where someone firebombed Aaron Brooks's house about an hour ago, Sullivan said grimly. Fire department's still on scene, but there's nothing left to save. House is a total loss. Aaron felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. His house, the home he'd shared with Sarah, where Bella had taken her first steps, where they'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases, and all the small moments that made up a family's life, was gone. Anyone hurt? He managed to ask. Neighbors called it in when they saw the flames. Fire department says it was definitely arson accelerant poured through the windows, multiple ignition points. Whoever did it wanted to make sure there was nothing left. Anderson was already reaching for her radio. This is Chief Anderson. I need a full forensics team at the Brooks residence, and I want statements from every neighbor within a 3-block radius. Also, put out a bolo for any suspicious vehicles in that area between midnight and dawn." "Already done, Chief," Sullivan replied. "But I don't think we're going to find much. This was professional work in and out, no witnesses, no evidence left behind." Aaron sank into one of the porch chairs, the full weight of his situation finally hitting him. His home was gone, his possessions, his memories, Sarah's pictures and clothes and jewelry, all of it reduced to ash and charred timber. More importantly, the message being sent was crystal clear. "We know where you live, we know who you are, and we can reach you anywhere." "Aaron," Anderson said gently, sitting down beside him. "I'm sorry. I know how much that house meant to you." "It's just stuff," Aaron said, though his voice cracked slightly on the words. "Sarah's been gone for 3 years. The house was just a place we used to live." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. The house had been more than just a place. It had been the last tangible connection to the life he'd built with his wife. The repository of memories that proved their love had been real, had mattered, had produced something beautiful in the form of their daughter. Now it was gone, and with it any possibility of returning to the quiet, anonymous life he'd been trying to build for himself and Bella. "The good news," Chen said, his tone carefully neutral, "is that this confirms we're on the right track. Someone is scared enough to escalate to arson, which means we're getting close to something they don't want us to find. The bad news," Santos added, "is that they're escalating to arson. What's next? Car bombs, sniper attacks." Sullivan, who had been listening to this exchange with growing alarm, finally spoke up. "Chief, what exactly is going on here? I know about the attack at the restaurant last night, but this sounds like we're dealing with something a lot bigger than a simple assassination attempt." Anderson looked at Chen, who nodded slightly. "Mark, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this porch. We have reason to believe that someone in our department has been providing information to drug traffickers for months. The attack last night was an attempt to eliminate me before I could identify the leak." Sullivan's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, disbelief, and finally, grim understanding. "That would explain a lot," he said quietly. "The raids that went wrong, the evidence that got contaminated the way some of our operations seemed to be anticipated." "What do you mean?" Aaron asked. 3 months ago, we had a solid tip about a meth lab operating out of an abandoned warehouse on the east side of town. When we got there, the place had been cleaned out, not just evacuated, but professionally sanitized. No residue, no equipment, nothing that would indicate drugs had ever been there. "Could have been bad intelligence," Chen suggested. "Could have been," Sullivan agreed. "Except that our informant was solid gold, someone who'd given us good information dozens of times before. And the timing was too perfect. Lab gets cleaned out exactly 18 hours after we started planning the raid." Anderson nodded grimly. "That's the pattern we've been seeing. Operations compromised with surgical precision, always just enough advance warning for the targets to escape, but not enough time for us to realize the intelligence had been leaked." "So what's the plan?" Sullivan asked. "How do we catch this guy?" "We're working on that," Anderson said carefully. Even though Sullivan was one of her most trusted officers, the reality was that they couldn't trust anyone completely until they identified the source of the leaks. Aaron stood up from his chair, his decision made. "I want to see my house." "Aaron, that's not a good idea," Anderson said. "If they're watching the property, then we'll know we're getting close to them." Aaron interrupted. "Besides, I need to see it. I need to know what's gone." Chen studied Aaron's face for a moment, then nodded. "We'll do it carefully. Full surveillance backup units, the works. But you're right, there might be evidence at the scene that could help us identify who did this." As they prepared to leave the safe house, Aaron stopped by the kitchen to check on Bella. She was seated at a small wooden table, coloring in a book that Officer Hayes had produced from somewhere, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration as she worked on what appeared to be a picture of a castle. "Hey, baby girl," Aaron said, kneeling down beside her chair. "Daddy has to go take care of some business, but I'll be back soon." Bella looked up from her coloring, her dark eyes serious. "Is it dangerous business?" Aaron hesitated, not wanting to lie to his daughter, but also not wanting to frighten her. "It might be a little dangerous," he said finally. But I'll be with Chief Anderson and some other police officers, so I'll be safe. Promise. I promise. Bella nodded solemnly, then returned to her coloring. Daddy, when the bad guys are all caught, can we get a new house? The question hit Aaron harder than he'd expected. Would you like a new house? Maybe one with a bigger yard so I could have a swing set. And maybe a dog. She looked up at him hopefully. Mommy always said we could get a dog when I was older. Aaron felt his throat tighten. Sarah had indeed promised Bella a dog, but there had never been enough money, or space, or time. Now with their old house gone and their old life destroyed, maybe it was time to start thinking about what they wanted their new life to look like. I think a dog sounds like a great idea, he said, kissing the top of her head. We'll start looking as soon as this is all over. Really? Really. But first, Daddy has to help catch the bad guys. Can you be brave while I'm gone? I'm always brave, Bella said matter-of-factly, and Aaron realized it was true. His 8-year-old daughter had faced her mother's death, her father's deployment-related PTSD, their financial struggles, and now an attempt on their lives, and she had done it all with a courage that humbled him. Yes, you are, he agreed. You're the bravest person I know. As Aaron prepared to leave the safe house, Officer Hayes approached him privately. Mr. Brooks, I just want you to know I've got kids of my own, and I understand what you're going through. I'll protect Bella like she was my own daughter. Thank you, Aaron said, meaning it. She's all I have left. Then we'll make sure you both come through this safe, Hayes replied. Whatever it takes. The drive back to Pine Ridge took them through mountain roads that Aaron had traveled countless times, but today everything looked different. Every parked car was a potential threat. Every stand of trees, a possible sniper position. Every curve in the road, a potential ambush site. His combat training had kicked into high gear, and he found himself automatically noting escape routes and defensive positions. Chief Anderson rode beside him in the unmarked Crown Vic, while Chen and Santos followed in the federal SUV. Sullivan had gone ahead to coordinate with the fire department and crime scene technicians, who were still processing the arson scene. Aaron, Anderson said quietly as they approached the outskirts of town. I want you to know that I take full responsibility for what happened to your house. If I hadn't asked for your help, you didn't ask for anything, Aaron interrupted. I made the choice to warn you about those gunmen. I made the choice to help you fight them, and I'm making the choice to help you catch whoever sent them. But your daughter, my daughter is safer with you protecting her than she would be if I tried to handle this alone. These people have resources, connections, professional killers on their payroll. I'm good, but I'm not good enough to take on an organization like that by myself. Anderson nodded, but Aaron could see the guilt in her expression. She was blaming herself for the destruction of his life, not understanding that his life had been destroyed 3 years ago when Sarah died. Everything since then had just been survival marking time, trying to give Bella some semblance of normalcy while he figured out how to be a single father. Maybe this crisis, terrible as it was, would finally give him a sense of purpose again. The smoke was visible from 6 blocks away, a dark column rising into the clear mountain air like a funeral pyre. Aaron's hands tightened on the steering wheel as they turned onto his street, and he saw the crowd of emergency vehicles, neighbors, and curious onlookers gathered around what had once been his home. The house was gone. Not damaged, not partially destroyed, completely gone. The fire had been so intense that even the foundation was cracked and blackened, the concrete driveway stained with soot and ash. Nothing remained of the structure except the brick chimney standing like a tombstone over the grave of his former life. Aaron parked across the street and sat for a moment staring at the devastation. Somewhere in that pile of ash and twisted metal had been Sarah's wedding dress, carefully preserved in the bedroom closet. Bella's baby pictures, Sarah's jewelry, the handwritten recipes that had been passed down through 3 generations of Sarah's family, all of it gone as if it had never existed. I'm sorry, Anderson said quietly. Aaron nodded but didn't trust himself to speak. He opened the car door and stepped out into the acrid smell of burned wood and melted plastic, his boots crunching on debris that had been blown into the street by the intensity of the fire. Fire Chief Tom Morrison approached them, his face grim beneath his protective helmet. Morrison was a good man, someone Aaron had known since high school, and the sympathy in his eyes was genuine. "Aaron, I'm sorry as hell about this," Morrison said, pulling off his gloves. "We got here as fast as we could, but by the time the first engine arrived, the whole structure was fully involved. Whoever did this used a lot of accelerant." "Any idea what kind?" Chen asked, showing his federal credentials. "Gasoline mostly, but there were other chemicals too. Professional job, they knew exactly how to ensure maximum destruction in minimum time." Aaron walked closer to the ruins, his eyes scanning for anything that might have survived the inferno. But there was nothing recognizable, nothing that connected this charred wasteland to the home where he had loved his wife and raised his daughter. "Aaron." The voice belonged to Mrs. Patterson, his elderly next-door neighbor. She approached carefully, her face streaked with tears. "I'm so sorry, dear. I tried to call you when I saw the flames, but—" "It's okay, Mrs. Patterson," Aaron said gently. "Bella and I weren't here. We're safe." "Thank God for that." The old woman dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "I saw them, you know, the men who did this." Every law enforcement officer within earshot immediately focused on Mrs. Patterson. "You saw who set the fire?" Anderson asked urgently. "Two men in a dark van. They parked right there." She pointed to a spot directly in front of Aaron's house. "Around 2 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. My arthritis was acting up, so I was sitting by my bedroom window when they arrived." "Can you describe them?" Chen asked, pulling out a notebook. "Not very well, I'm afraid. It was dark, and they were wearing dark clothes. But I can tell you they moved like they knew exactly what they were doing. No hesitation, no looking around nervously. They went straight to Aaron's house with containers of some kind, poured something around the foundation, and through the windows, then lit it up." "How long from arrival to ignition?" Aaron asked. Mrs. Patterson thought for a moment. "Maybe 5 minutes. They were very efficient." "What about the van? Can you describe it?" "Dark blue or black, I think. No windows in the back. It looked like a work van, the kind contractors use." Chen was writing rapidly, but Aaron could see the frustration in the federal agent's expression. The description could fit thousands of vehicles in Colorado alone. "Mrs. Patterson," Anderson said gently, "would you be willing to work with a sketch artist? Even small details might help us identify these men." "Of course, dear. Anything to help catch the animals who did this." As Mrs. Patterson was led away to give her formal statement, Aaron continued his survey of the destruction. Something was nagging at him, some detail that didn't fit the pattern of professional arson that everyone was assuming. "Chen," he called, "you said this was professional work, right?" "That's what it looks like. Why, boy, professional arsonists don't usually stick around to watch their handiwork, and they definitely don't park directly in front of the target. Too much risk of being seen, of leaving evidence." Anderson caught on immediately. "You think they wanted to be seen?" "I think they wanted Mrs. Patterson to see them. I think they wanted witnesses who could testify that Aaron Brooks's house was burned down by unknown assailants, making it clear that he was a target." "A message," Santos said, understanding dawning in her voice. "They're not just trying to eliminate you, they're trying to terrorize you, make you so afraid for your daughter's safety that you back off." Aaron nodded grimly. "Which means we're definitely on the right track. They wouldn't go to this much trouble if they weren't scared." "Or it means they're preparing for war," Chen said quietly. "Eliminating your safe haven, isolating you from your support network, forcing you to operate from a position of weakness." The implications of Chen's words settled over the group like a cold mountain fog. If the corrupt cops and their drug trafficking partners were preparing for an extended conflict, then the violence at Cedar Steakhouse and the arson attack on Aaron's house were just the opening moves in a much larger game. "We need to get back to the safe house," Anderson said finally. "If they're escalating this quickly, Bella needs to be moved to a more secure location." But as they prepared to leave the ruins of Aaron's former life, Officer Sullivan approached with an expression that suggested more bad news. "Chief," he said quietly, "we just got word from the hospital. Miguel Vasquez, the dealer we arrested with the burner phone. Someone got to him too." "Dead?" Anderson asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Murdered in his hospital bed. Security cameras show a man dressed as a doctor entering his room around 4 a.m. Vasquez was found an hour later with his IV line contaminated with potassium chloride." Aaron felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. 3 deaths in less than 12 hours, the 2 assassins in their jail cells, and now the drug dealer who might have been able to identify his police contact. Someone was eliminating witnesses with ruthless efficiency. "That's it," Chen said firmly. "We're moving to a federal safe house. Full protective custody for both you and your daughter." But Aaron was shaking his head even before the federal agent finished speaking. "No, we're not running." "Aaron, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. These people just demonstrated that they can reach targets in police custody and in a hospital. You think a federal safe house is going to stop them? It's better protection than what we can provide locally," Anderson said. "Maybe. But it's also exactly what they want me isolated, dependent on federal protection, effectively neutralized as a threat. They're not trying to kill me, at least not yet. They're trying to scare me into backing down." Aaron looked once more at the smoldering remains of his house, at the place where he had hoped to raise his daughter into adulthood. The destruction was complete, but it had also freed him from the last chains tying him to his old life. "I'm not backing down," he said quietly. "I'm going to help you catch these bastards, and then I'm going to make sure they pay for what they've done." The war had begun, and Aaron Brooks was ready to fight. The federal safe house in Denver sat like a fortress of glass and steel among the downtown high-rises, its 23rd floor offering a commanding view of the Rocky Mountains to the west and the sprawling plains to the east. Aaron stood at the bulletproof windows, watching the sun climb over the front range, while Bella slept in the bedroom behind him, exhausted by the previous day's upheaval. 3 days had passed since his house burned, and they were no closer to identifying the corrupt cop who had set everything in motion. "Can't sleep either," Chief Anderson's voice carried from the kitchenette where she was making coffee with the practiced efficiency of someone who had survived on caffeine for far too long. Aaron turned from the window, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the way her hand never strayed far from her service weapon. The safe house was secure, but security was relative when facing an enemy who had already demonstrated the ability to reach targets anywhere. "Too many questions," Aaron replied, accepting the steaming mug she offered. "And not enough answers." Anderson settled into one of the leather chairs that furnished the safe house's main room, her movements careful and controlled. She had changed since the attack at Cedar Steakhouse, Aaron realized. The confident police chief, who had commanded respect through presence and authority, had been replaced by someone harder, more watchful, carrying the weight of knowing that people she trusted might be trying to kill her. "Agent Chen thinks we're making progress," she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Agent Chen is a politician in a federal agent's clothing," Aaron replied. "He's more concerned with protecting the Bureau's reputation than catching the people who are trying to kill you." Through the secure communications equipment that dominated one corner of the safe house, they could hear Chen coordinating with various federal agencies, his voice carrying the measured authority of someone who believed that bureaucracy could solve any problem given enough time and resources. But time was something they didn't have. The corruption investigation had expanded beyond Pine Ridge, drawing in DEA agents from Colorado Springs, FBI financial crime specialists from Washington, and enough federal acronyms to fill a telephone book. What had started as a local police corruption case was now being treated as a multi-state organized crime investigation, complete with task forces and jurisdictional disputes. "Daddy!" Bella's voice drifted from the bedroom, small and uncertain, in the dawn quiet. Aaron set down his coffee and headed toward his daughter's voice, finding her sitting up in the queen-sized bed, her dark hair tousled from sleep and her stuffed bear clutched against her chest. "Morning, baby girl," he said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. "How did you sleep?" "I had bad dreams," Bella said, her voice still thick with sleep. "About fire and bad men and you going away." Aaron's heart clenched. His 8-year-old daughter was showing signs of trauma that no child should have to experience. But the federal psychologist assigned to her case had assured him that children were remarkably resilient, especially with proper support. "I'm not going anywhere," Aaron said, pulling her into his arms. "Remember what Daddy promised you, that you always come back," Bella recited, though her grip on his shirt suggested she needed the reassurance of physical contact more than words. "That's right. And Daddy keeps his promises." Through the bedroom's reinforced windows, Aaron could see federal agents maintaining their perimeter security, discreet figures, moving through the downtown crowds with the purposeful efficiency of professionals protecting a high-value target. But he also knew that somewhere in those same crowds could be surveillance teams working for the organization that wanted Chief Anderson dead. "Daddy, when can we go home?" Bella asked, though they both knew there was no home to return to. "Soon, sweetheart, as soon as the police catch all the bad guys. And then we can get our dog." Aaron smiled despite everything. His daughter's ability to focus on future possibilities rather than present dangers continued to amaze him. "Then we can definitely get our dog. What kind would you like?" "A big one that can protect us," Bella said seriously, "like the police dogs." Before Aaron could respond, the secure communications array erupted in activity. Agent Chen's voice cut through the morning quiet with an urgency that sent adrenaline flooding through Aaron's system. All units, we have a situation developing at the Pine Ridge Police Department. Multiple officers down, shots fired, suspect barricaded inside the building." Aaron was moving before Chen finished speaking, his military training taking over as he processed the tactical implications. If someone was attacking the police station directly, it meant the enemy had decided that subtle corruption and intimidation weren't working fast enough. "Stay with Bella," he told Anderson as he grabbed his jacket and the tactical vest that federal agents had provided. "I'm going back." "Like hell you are," Anderson replied, her own vest already in her hands. "That's my department under attack." "And that's my daughter who needs protection," Aaron shot back. "Someone has to stay with her." The argument was interrupted by Agent Chen's appearance in the doorway, his face grim and his phone pressed to his ear. "We're all going," he announced. "Full federal response. Aaron, you're our tactical consultant. Chief Anderson, your people need to see you taking charge." "What about Bella?" Aaron demanded. "Protective detail stays here. 4 agents, full perimeter security, medical support on standby." Chen's tone brooked no argument. "Your daughter will be safer here than anywhere else in Colorado." Aaron looked back at Bella, who was watching the adult conversation with the serious attention children brought to situations they sensed were important. He thought about leaving her again, about breaking another promise to always come back, about the possibility that this time he might not survive to keep his word. "Daddy has to go help the police officers who are in trouble," he said quietly. "But Agent Martinez and Agent Davis are going to stay here with you, okay?" "Are they nice?" Bella asked, evaluating the 2 federal agents who had appeared in the bedroom doorway. Agent Martinez, a young Latina woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, knelt down to Bella's eye level. "We're very nice, sweetheart. And we brought coloring books and games and even some movies you might like." "What kind of movies?" Bella asked, her 8-year-old priorities asserting themselves. "Princess movies," Agent Davis added. He was an older man with gray hair and the sort of paternal warmth that suggested he had children of his own. "And we thought maybe we could order pizza for lunch." Bella looked to Aaron for confirmation. "Is pizza okay, Daddy?" "Pizza is perfect," Aaron said, kissing her forehead. "Be good for Agent Martinez and Agent Davis." "Okay, Daddy will be back soon." "Promise." Aaron hesitated for a split second, remembering all the promises he'd made to Sarah that he hadn't been able to keep, all the times he'd told her everything would be okay when cancer was already eating away at her body. But Bella needed his certainty more than his honesty. "I promise," he said. The helicopter ride to Pine Ridge took 45 minutes, the federal aircraft cutting through mountain air that was crystal clear and deceptively peaceful. Aaron sat in tactical gear that felt like a second skin, his mind automatically running through assault scenarios and urban combat techniques he hadn't used since Afghanistan. Chief Anderson sat across from him, checking her service weapon for the 3rd time and coordinating with her remaining officers through encrypted radio channels. The reports coming in were fragmentary but alarming: multiple casualties, unknown number of suspects, federal and local agencies responding. "Talk to me, Sullivan," Anderson said into her radio. "What's the situation on the ground?" Officer Sullivan's voice crackled through the static, tense and professional, despite the chaos Aaron could hear in the background. "Chief, we've got 3 officers down, 2 critical. Suspects are holed up in the evidence storage area on the 2nd floor. They've got hostages." "How many suspects?" "Unknown. Could be anywhere from 2 to 6. They came in through the back entrance around 0600, seemed to know exactly where they were going. Aaron and Anderson exchanged a look. Professional assault on a police station during shift change with specific targeting of the evidence storage area. This wasn't random violence. This was a surgical strike designed to eliminate evidence and send a message. Any demands? Chen asked into his own radio. Negative on demands. They're not talking, just shooting at anyone who gets too close. Agent Chen studied a tactical map of the Pine Ridge Police Department building, his finger tracing possible assault routes and defensive positions. Aaron, you know this building. What's your assessment? Aaron had been in the police station dozens of times over the years, mostly for minor issues like expired vehicle registration or community meetings. But his military training allowed him to visualize the structure in tactical terms. Sight lines cover positions, potential entry and exit routes. Evidence storage is on the second floor rear of the building, he said, pulling the map closer. One staircase at each end, plus an elevator in the center. If they're smart, they've got the stairs covered and the elevator disabled. What about windows? 2 windows in the evidence room, but they face the parking lot. No cover for an assault team, and the windows are reinforced glass. Anderson was listening to reports from her officers on the scene, her expression growing darker with each update. They're asking for me specifically, she said finally. Want to negotiate directly with the chief? Absolutely not, Chen said immediately. We don't negotiate with terrorists. These aren't terrorists, Aaron said quietly. They're cleaners. They're here to destroy evidence, eliminate witnesses, and probably kill Chief Anderson if they get the chance. Then what do you suggest? Aaron studied the tactical map, his mind running through possibilities. We give them what they want, sort of. Explain. They want Chief Anderson, but they're expecting her to walk into their trap. Instead, we create a different kind of trap. Use their expectations against them. Anderson was already shaking her head. I'm not using civilians as bait, Aaron. I'm not suggesting we use civilians. I'm suggesting we use me. The helicopter was beginning its descent toward the improvised landing zone that had been set up in Pine Ridge's municipal park just 4 blocks from the police station. Aaron could see the chaos below: emergency vehicles, federal agents, local police news crews being held back by perimeter barriers. The plan is simple. Aaron continued, his voice cutting through the noise of the rotors. I go in as a negotiator ostensibly to arrange for Chief Anderson's surrender, but instead of walking into their ambush, I provide targeting information for a tactical team. Too dangerous, Chen said. If they recognize you from the restaurant, they won't. 2 of them are dead and the others never got a good look at me in the chaos. Aaron was already checking his tactical gear, making sure his radio and earpiece were functioning properly. Besides, they're not expecting the guy who saved Chief Anderson to walk into their stronghold voluntarily. It could work, Anderson said reluctantly. But Aaron, if something goes wrong, Bella loses her father and you lose your best chance of ending this. Aaron's voice was steady, but Anderson could see the fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself, but fear of leaving his daughter orphaned. But if we don't try something, those hostages are going to die and we're back to square one on the investigation. The helicopter touched down in the park and immediately they were surrounded by federal agents and local police, creating a security perimeter. Aaron could see the Pine Ridge Police Department building in the distance, its windows dark and ominous against the morning sky. Final equipment check, Chen said, his tone suggesting he still wasn't entirely comfortable with the plan, but recognized its tactical necessity. Aaron's gear was minimal, but effective body armor concealed beneath a civilian jacket, encrypted radio earpiece, and a backup weapon that wouldn't be visible during a casual search. His primary weapon would be the one thing no equipment could provide: his ability to read tactical situations and react with the speed that had kept him alive through 3 combat deployments. Remember, Anderson said as they approached the police station, your job is intelligence gathering, not heroics. Get and assess the situation, provide targeting data, and get out. And if the tactical team can't get a clean shot, then you wait for backup, Chen said firmly. Under no circumstances do you engage multiple hostiles on your own. Aaron nodded, but they all knew that tactical plans rarely survived contact with the enemy. If the situation deteriorated, he would have to make split-second decisions based on incomplete information and the knowledge that innocent lives hung in the balance. The Pine Ridge Police Department building looked like a war zone. Bullet holes pocked the brick facade, several windows had been shot out, and the main entrance was barricaded with overturned furniture. Police and federal vehicles formed a loose perimeter around the building, their occupants maintaining defensive positions behind ballistic shields. Officer Sullivan met them at the command post that had been established in the hardware store across the street from the police station. "Chief, thank God you're here. We've got 4 hostages in the evidence room, 2 civilian clerks and 2 officers. The suspects have been quiet for the last 20 minutes, but they shot at anyone who tried to approach." "Casualties?" Anderson asked. "Officer Barnes took one in the shoulder, but he's stable. Officer Rodriguez caught some glass fragments when they shot out the windows, but nothing serious. Could have been a lot worse." Aaron studied the building through binoculars, noting the positions of the blown-out windows and the lack of movement in the evidence room. "They're waiting for something," he said. "Professional killers don't hole up in a police station unless they're buying time for something else." "What kind of something else?" Chen asked. "Could be waiting for darkness. Could be waiting for you to bring in Chief Anderson. Could be waiting for their real target to arrive." The implication hung in the air like smoke from a gunfire. If the assault on the police station was a diversion, then the real attack could be happening elsewhere, perhaps at the federal safe house where Bella was supposed to be protected. Anderson was already reaching for her radio. "Agent Martinez, this is Chief Anderson. Status report on package safe." The response crackled through immediately. "Package safe is secure, Chief. No movement on the perimeter, no threats detected." Aaron felt some of the tension leave his shoulders, but he knew the feeling was premature. Professional military tactics often involved multiple diversionary attacks designed to scatter defensive resources before striking the primary target. "I'm going in," he announced, checking his earpiece one final time. "Aaron," Anderson said quietly, "if this goes wrong, tell Bella that her daddy loved her more than all the stars in the sky," Aaron finished, "and tell her that she should still get that dog." Before anyone could argue further, Aaron was moving toward the police station, his hands visible and empty, walking with the measured pace of someone approaching a negotiation rather than an assault. His earpiece crackled with the voices of federal agents coordinating sniper positions and tactical teams, but he forced himself to ignore the chatter and focus on the building ahead. The front entrance of the police station had been barricaded from the inside, but Aaron knew there was a side entrance that led directly to the administrative offices. If the suspects were focused on the evidence storage area, they might not have secured all the secondary entrances. "Ghost 1 to command," he said quietly into his radio microphone. "Approaching the building from the east side, no movement visible in the windows." "Copy, Ghost 1. Thermal imaging shows 4 heat signatures in the evidence room plus an unknown number of suspects." Aaron reached the side entrance and tested the door. Locked, but not barricaded. He had lock-picking skills from his military training, but using them would take time and create noise. Instead, he decided to announce his presence. "This is Aaron Brooks," he called out loudly enough for his voice to carry through the building. "I'm here to negotiate the release of the hostages." The response was immediate, the sharp crack of rifle fire from the second-floor bullets punching through the glass of the administrative office windows. Aaron dove for cover behind a concrete planter, his heart racing as he realized how close the shots had come. "Ghost 1 to command. I'm taking fire from the second floor. They know I'm here." "Copy that. Snipers are trying to acquire targets, but the suspects are staying back from the windows." Aaron waited for the shooting to stop, then called out again. "I'm not armed, I just want to talk." This time, the response was a voice instead of gunfire. "Aaron Brooks, the hero from the restaurant." The accent was similar to the gunman he'd fought at Cedar Steakhouse, Eastern European, possibly Russian, or Ukrainian. Professional military contractors, Aaron realized. The kind of men who sold their skills to the highest bidder, without regard for borders or politics. "That's right," Aaron replied. "I want to end this without anyone else getting hurt." "You want to end this. You bring us Chief Anderson, alone. No weapons, no backup. You have 30 minutes. Aaron's radio crackled with Chen's voice. "Negative, Ghost 1. Do not engage in negotiations. We're moving tactical teams into position." But Aaron was already formulating a different plan. The suspects wanted Chief Anderson, but they also clearly recognized him as a threat. That meant they were taking him seriously, which gave him leverage he hadn't expected. "I need proof that the hostages are alive," Aaron called out. There was a pause, then the sound of movement from inside the building. A moment later, a female voice called out from the second floor, one of the civilian clerks, Aaron realized. "Please help us. They have guns, and they say they're going to—" The voice was cut off abruptly, followed by the sound of a blow and a cry of pain. "Proof enough," the accented voice called down. "You bring Chief Anderson or we start killing hostages, beginning with the pretty young clerk." Aaron's blood ran cold. These weren't just professional killers, they were sadists who enjoyed inflicting terror on innocent people. The same kind of men who had tried to kill Chief Anderson in a restaurant full of families, who had burned his house while his daughter slept safely elsewhere. "Ghost 1 to command," he said quietly into his radio. "I'm going in." "Negative. Wait for tactical support." But Aaron was already moving. The side entrance was still locked, but a broken window on the ground floor provided access to the administrative offices. He slipped through the opening like a shadow, his combat training taking over as he navigated the familiar hallways of the police station. The building felt wrong, too quiet, too empty, with the kind of oppressive silence that preceded violence. Aaron could hear movement on the second floor, the occasional murmur of voices, the scrape of furniture being moved. The suspects were repositioning, probably preparing for an assault they knew was coming. Aaron found the main staircase and began climbing each step, measured and silent. His backup weapon was in his hand now, though he hoped he wouldn't need to use it. The goal was intelligence gathering, not another firefight. But as he reached the second floor landing, Aaron realized that intelligence gathering might not be enough. Through the open door of the evidence room, he could see 4 people zip-tied to chairs, 2 police officers and 2 civilians, all of them showing signs of rough treatment. Standing over them were 3 men in tactical gear, their weapons professional grade and their movements coordinated. And in the center of the room, Aaron could see stacks of evidence boxes being doused with what appeared to be gasoline. They weren't just here to steal evidence, they were here to destroy it. All of it. Every piece of proof that could connect corrupt police officers to drug trafficking, every witness statement that could expose the conspiracy, every physical sample that could be used in court. This wasn't just an assault on a police station. This was the systematic destruction of an entire criminal investigation. Aaron keyed his radio. "Command, this is Ghost 1. They're burning evidence. We need to move now." "Copy that. Tactical teams are in position." But even as federal agents prepared their assault, Aaron could see one of the suspects pulling out what appeared to be a remote detonator. Not just gasoline, he realized with growing horror. Explosives. They were planning to bring down the entire second floor, killing the hostages, destroying all the evidence and making sure no one could ever prove what had really happened in Pine Ridge. "Command, they have explosives. If we assault through the main entrances, they'll detonate and kill the hostages." "What do you recommend?" Aaron looked at the evidence room, calculating angles and timing and the kind of split-second decisions that separated successful missions from disasters. 3 armed men, 4 hostages, unknown quantity of explosives, and a building full of federal agents waiting for his intelligence assessment. "I recommend you trust me," he said quietly. And then Aaron Brooks, former Marine infantry, single father and reluctant hero, stepped into the evidence room to face 3 professional killers, armed with nothing but his training, his courage, and his absolute determination to get home to his daughter. "Gentlemen," he said calmly, his weapon steady, and his voice carrying the authority of a man who had faced death before and wasn't intimidated by it. "I think we need to talk." The explosion that followed shook the entire building. The explosion that Aaron had anticipated never came. Instead, the evidence room fell into a tense silence as 3 professional killers found themselves facing a man who radiated the kind of lethal calm that came from years of combat experience. The lead gunman, a scarred veteran with dead eyes and Slavic features, kept his rifle trained on Aaron while his companions maintained their positions over the bound hostages. "Aaron Brooks," the man said, his accent thick with Eastern European consonants. "The American hero who thinks he can save everyone." "I'm not here to save everyone," Aaron replied, his own weapon steady and his voice carrying no trace of fear. I'm here to save them." He nodded toward the hostages without taking his eyes off the gunmen. "And to finish what we started at the restaurant." The scarred man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You cost my employers a great deal of money, Mr. Brooks, and now you will cost them nothing at all." But Aaron had spent the precious seconds of conversation cataloging everything he could see: the positions of the suspects, the location of the explosive devices, the condition of the hostages, and most importantly, the arrogance that came from men who had never faced serious opposition. "Your employers made a mistake," Aaron said conversationally. "They sent you after a police chief instead of handling their business quietly. Now half the federal government is investigating their operation." "Not for much longer," the gunman replied, his finger tightening on the trigger. "When this building comes down, all the evidence dies with it, and so do all the witnesses." It was exactly the confirmation Aaron needed. These men weren't just here to steal evidence, they were here to destroy it completely, along with anyone who might testify about police corruption or drug trafficking. The explosion would be blamed on a gas leak or faulty wiring, and the investigation would die in the rubble. Through his earpiece, Aaron could hear Agent Chen coordinating with tactical teams positioned around the building. Federal snipers had sight lines on some of the windows, but the suspects were staying back from the glass, using the hostages as human shields. "Ghost 1, we're ready to breach on your signal." Chen's voice crackled quietly in Aaron's ear. But Aaron knew that any conventional assault would result in the detonation of the explosives and the death of everyone on the second floor. The suspects had positioned themselves perfectly close enough to the detonator to trigger it instantly, far enough from the windows to avoid sniper fire, with clear fields of fire covering both stairwells, unless someone created a distraction from inside the room. "Tell me something," Aaron said to the lead gunman, his tone casual despite the deadly tension. "Your boss, the cop who's been feeding you information, does he know you're about to blow up his own police station?" The question had the desired effect. Aaron saw the brief flicker of uncertainty in the gunman's eyes, the momentary hesitation that suggested there were aspects of this operation that hadn't been fully explained to the hired muscle. "What cop?" the second gunman asked, his own accent suggesting he might be new to the team. "Shut up, Dmitri," the leader snapped, but the damage was done. Aaron had confirmation that at least some of the mercenaries didn't know about the police corruption angle. "You didn't know," Aaron continued, pressing his advantage. "The whole reason you're here is because one of Chief Anderson's officers has been selling information to drug dealers. Tonight's little explosion is designed to destroy evidence of police corruption, not just drug trafficking." "I said shut up," the leader snarled, but Aaron could see doubt creeping into the other gunmen's expressions. Professional mercenaries didn't like being kept in the dark about their missions, especially when those missions involved killing law enforcement officers. It suggested they were expendable, that their employers might decide to eliminate them as loose ends once the job was finished. "Think about it," Aaron pressed. "Why hire foreign contractors for a simple evidence destruction job? Why not use local talent, unless your employer doesn't want anyone who can be traced back to him?" The tension in the room was becoming explosive in its own right. Aaron could see the hostages, 2 police officers, and 2 civilian clerks watching the exchange with desperate hope. One of the officers, a young woman Aaron recognized as Detective Sarah Martinez, was working quietly at her restraints, using the distraction of the conversation to try to free herself. "Enough talking," the leader said, but his voice carried less certainty than before. "You drop your weapon or I start killing hostages." Aaron appeared to consider this, his weapon lowering slightly, but instead of dropping it, he was calculating angles and distances, timing and probabilities. 3 armed men, 4 hostages, multiple explosive devices, and a building full of federal agents waiting for his signal. The mathematics of survival were complex, but Aaron had learned long ago that sometimes the best tactical solution was the one nobody expected. "You know what?" he said conversationally. "I think I'll keep my gun." And then everything happened at once. Aaron dove left as he fired his first shot, catching the leader's center mass and spinning him away from the detonator. The second and third gunmen opened fire immediately, their muzzle flashes strobing in the confined space as Aaron rolled behind an overturned desk. But Detective Martinez had used the split second of distraction to free herself from her restraints, and she launched herself at the nearest gunman with the desperate courage of someone who knew she was fighting for her life. Her tackle sent both of them crashing into a stack of evidence boxes, scattering files and photographs across the floor. Federal agents down, down, down. The tactical team breached through both stairwells simultaneously, their entry timed perfectly with Aaron's distraction. Flashbang grenades detonated in the hallway, adding to the chaos and confusion. The remaining gunman tried to reach the detonator, but Aaron was already moving, his combat training taking over as he closed the distance with deadly efficiency. They went down together, rolling across scattered evidence as they fought for control of the explosive device. The gunman was strong and well-trained, but Aaron was fighting for more than just his own survival. He was fighting for the hostages who had trusted him to save them, for the investigation that would die if the evidence was destroyed, and most importantly for his daughter, who was waiting for him to come home. The detonator skittered across the floor as they struggled, coming to rest near one of the remaining hostages, a middle-aged evidence clerk named Dorothy, who had been working late when the attack began. Without hesitation, she kicked the device away from the fighting men, sending it sliding under a heavy filing cabinet where neither could reach it. Aaron managed to get his arm around the gunman's throat, applying the chokehold he'd learned in Marine Corps hand-to-hand combat training. The man struggled desperately, his own training evident in the way he tried to break the hold, but Aaron had leverage and motivation on his side. "Sleep tight," Aaron whispered as the gunman's struggles weakened and finally stopped. The evidence room fell silent, except for the ringing in everyone's ears from the flashbang grenades and gunfire. Federal agents swarmed the space, securing the unconscious suspects and checking on the hostages. Paramedics followed close behind, treating minor injuries and checking everyone for shock. "Ghost 1 report." Agent Chen's voice crackled through Aaron's earpiece. "Room secure." Aaron replied, his voice hoarse from the adrenaline and cordite smoke. 3 suspects down, 4 hostages safe. Explosive devices neutralized. But even as he spoke, Aaron knew this was only part of the victory. The evidence had been saved, the hostages rescued, but the corrupt police officer who had started everything was still out there, still feeding information to drug traffickers, still posing a threat to Chief Anderson and anyone else who got too close to the truth. Chief Anderson appeared in the doorway of the evidence room, her weapon drawn and her face grim with determination. She surveyed the scene, the scattered evidence, the bound suspects, the shaken but alive hostages, and Aaron saw something like relief flicker in her green eyes. "Nice work," she said simply. "It's not over," Aaron replied. "We still don't know who the inside man is." "Actually," Detective Martinez said from where she was being checked by a paramedic, "we might know more than we think." All eyes turned to the young detective who was holding up a cell phone she'd retrieved from one of the gunmen during their struggle. "This phone has been receiving text messages during the assault. Real-time updates about federal agent positions, tactical team movements, the works." Agent Chen took the phone carefully, his expression growing darker as he scrolled through the messages. "These updates were sent from inside our command post," he said grimly. "Someone with access to our tactical communications has been feeding information to the suspects." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. The corruption wasn't limited to the Pine Ridge Police Department, it reached into the federal task force that had been assembled to investigate it. "Who had access to tactical communications?" Anderson asked. Chen's face was pale as he considered the possibilities. "Task force leaders, senior agents, liaison officers from local law enforcement." He trailed off as the full scope of the breach became apparent. "And anyone with administrative access to federal communication systems," Aaron added quietly. "Someone who could monitor radio traffic, read encrypted messages, track agent movements in real time." The secure radio on Anderson's belt crackled to life with a priority message. All units. We have a situation at the federal safe house. Shots fired, agents down. Package safe is compromised." Aaron felt his world collapse. Bella. While he'd been playing hero at the police station, someone had attacked the safe house, where his daughter was supposed to be protected. "No," he whispered, then louder. "No." He was moving before anyone could stop him, pushing past federal agents and paramedics, his only thought getting to his daughter. Anderson and Chen followed, but Aaron was already at the stairwell, taking the steps 3 at a time in his desperate rush to reach the helicopter that would take him back to Denver. But as they reached the ground floor, Aaron's radio crackled with a different voice. Agent Martinez, the young woman who had been assigned to protect Bella. Ghost 1. Ghost 1. This is Guardian Angel. Package safe is secure. Repeat. Package safe is secure. Aaron stopped so suddenly that Anderson nearly collided with him. What? False alarm. Ghost 1. We had a break-in attempt, but the perimeter held. Package safe never left the secure area. 2 suspects in custody, no injuries to federal personnel or package safe. Relief flooded through Aaron so powerfully that he had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. Bella was safe. His daughter was alive and protected, and the attack on the safe house had been nothing more than a probe that federal security had easily repelled. They were testing our response, Chen realized. The attack here was a diversion to draw resources away from the safe house, and the probe there was designed to test our security procedures. Which means they're planning something bigger, Anderson said grimly. But Aaron was already thinking 3 steps ahead, his tactical mind processing the pattern of attacks and counterattacks that had defined the last week of his life. No, he said slowly. They're not planning something bigger. They're running. What do you mean? Think about it. Professional assault on a police station to destroy evidence. Coordinated probe of a federal safe house. Real-time intelligence being fed to mercenaries during an active operation. Aaron's voice gained strength as the pieces fell into place. This isn't escalation, this is desperation. They're trying to eliminate all the evidence and witnesses before they disappear forever. Agent Chen was nodding, his own analytical mind reaching the same conclusion. Which means we're closer to identifying the corrupt officer than we realized. Close enough that they're willing to risk everything on one final push. The phone messages, Detective Martinez said, still clutching the cell phone she'd taken from the gunman. We can trace them back to their source. Find out exactly who was feeding information to the mercenaries. Chen took the phone again, this time connecting it to a laptop computer that one of his technical specialists had brought from the command post. NSA has software that can trace encrypted communications in real time, he explained as his fingers flew across the keyboard. If we can identify the source device. The computer screen filled with scrolling code as federal algorithms worked to decrypt and trace the message traffic. Aaron watched the process with growing impatience, knowing that every minute they delayed gave the corrupt officer more time to escape or cover his tracks. Got it, Chen announced. Source device is registered to... His face went white as he read the information on the screen. Who? Anderson demanded. Deputy District Attorney Marcus Webb, Chen said quietly. The man who's been coordinating the federal prosecution of this case. The silence that followed was deafening. Webb had been present for every briefing, every tactical planning session, every decision about witness protection and evidence handling. He'd had access to all federal communications, all operational plans, all intelligence about the investigation. And he'd been feeding it all to the drug trafficking organization he was supposed to be prosecuting. Son of a bitch, Anderson breathed. He's been playing both sides from the beginning. It's worse than that, Aaron said, his mind racing through the implications. He's the one who convinced us to move Bella to the federal safe house. He's the one who coordinated our response to tonight's attacks. He knows exactly where my daughter is, and he knows exactly how she's being protected. The radio crackled again, this time with Agent Martinez's voice carrying a note of urgency. Guardian Angel to command, we have a federal vehicle approaching the safe house. Single occupant requesting access for priority briefing with package safe's father. Aaron's blood turned to ice. That's him. Webb is going after Bella directly. He was moving again, but this time, Anderson and Chen were right beside him. All 3 of them racing toward the helicopter that would take them back to Denver, and the showdown that would determine whether Aaron's daughter lived or died. But as they reached the aircraft, Aaron's tactical mind was already working through the challenge ahead. Webb had a head start, federal credentials that would get him past security and inside knowledge of every protection protocol that was supposed to keep Bella safe. More importantly, he was desperate enough to risk a direct assault on a federal safe house, which meant he had nothing left to lose. The flight to Denver took 35 minutes, but it felt like 35 hours. Aaron sat in the helicopter's cramped cabin, listening to radio traffic as federal agents coordinated their response to Webb's approach to the safe house. But he could hear the confusion in their voices, the uncertainty that came from not knowing which orders they could trust. "Guardian Angel, this is Command," Chen said into his radio. "Under no circumstances is Deputy District Attorney Webb to be given access to package safe. Detain him for questioning immediately." "Copy that command. But he's already in the building. Used federal override codes to bypass security. He's on his way to the residential floor now." Aaron felt his heart stop. Webb was in the same building as Bella, probably in the same hallway, possibly already at the door to the apartment where she was supposed to be safe. "Guardian Angel, get package safe to the panic room immediately," Aaron said into his own radio. "Lock it down and don't open it for anyone except me." "Copy Ghost 1, moving package safe now." But Aaron could hear gunfire in the background of the transmission, the sharp crack of pistol shots echoing through the safe house's corridors. Webb wasn't planning to take Bella hostage. He was planning to eliminate the last witness who could connect him to the corruption conspiracy. The helicopter couldn't fly fast enough. When they finally reached the safe house, the lobby was swarming with federal agents and paramedics. Aaron burst through the secure entrance like a man possessed, his only thought reaching his daughter before Webb could hurt her. But as he reached the residential floor, he found Agent Martinez sitting in the hallway outside the panic room, her service weapon drawn, and her face grim. "He's in there," she said simply. "With your daughter." Aaron felt the world stop. "Is she—" "She's alive, for now, but he's demanding safe passage out of the country in exchange for her life." Through the reinforced door of the panic room, Aaron could hear Webb's voice, calm and professional, even in the midst of his desperation. "I know you're out there, Aaron, and I know you care more about your daughter than you do about justice." "Let her go, Webb," Aaron called back. "She's just a child. She doesn't know anything about your operation. She knows you, and you know too much. Simple mathematics." Aaron studied the panic room door, his mind automatically calculating assault options. But the room had been designed to withstand precisely this kind of attack: reinforced steel electronic locks, no windows or alternate access points. "What do you want?" Aaron asked. "Helicopter to the airport, private jet fueled and ready, and a 12-hour head start before anyone tries to follow me. In exchange, your daughter lives." Agent Chen had reached the residential floor, his face grim as he assessed the tactical situation. "We don't negotiate with terrorists," he said quietly. "We do when they have my daughter." Aaron replied, his voice carrying an edge that made the federal agent step back. But even as he spoke, Aaron was formulating a different plan. The panic room was designed to keep attackers out, but it was also designed to keep occupants safe while help arrived. Webb might have federal override codes, but Aaron had something more valuable: a father's desperate love for his child. "Webb," he called out, "you made one mistake." "What's that?" "You assumed I was the only one in this family with military training." There was a pause from inside the panic room, and Aaron smiled grimly. Webb didn't know about the conversations Aaron had been having with Bella since Sarah's death, the way he'd been teaching her basic self-defense and emergency procedures, the games they played that were really lessons in surviving dangerous situations. "Bella," Aaron called out loudly enough for his voice to carry through the door, "remember what Daddy taught you about bad guys who make promises they don't plan to keep?" The answer came in the form of Webb's scream of pain and rage, followed by the sound of a struggle inside the panic room. Aaron had taught his 8-year-old daughter that if someone was going to hurt her anyway, she should fight back with everything she had. Apparently, she'd been listening. The electronic lock on the panic room door disengaged with a soft click. Webb's override codes working in reverse as he tried to escape from a furious 8-year-old who had just kicked him in a very sensitive area. Aaron was through the door before it fully opened. His weapon trained on Webb, who was doubled over in pain and trying to draw his service pistol with one hand while fending off Bella's continued assault with the other. Daddy! Bella cried, launching herself at Aaron with the desperation of a child who had thought she might never see her father again. "I've got you, baby girl," Aaron said, catching her with one arm while keeping his weapon pointed at Webb with the other. "I've got you." Webb straightened slowly, his face contorted with pain and rage. "You think this is over? You think killing me solves anything?" "I don't plan to kill you," Aaron said calmly. "I plan to let the justice system handle you. After you spend the next 20 years in federal prison thinking about what happens to corrupt prosecutors who threaten children." But Webb was already reaching for his backup weapon, desperation overriding tactical sense, as he realized his last chance for escape was slipping away. Aaron's shot was clean and precise, catching Webb in the shoulder and spinning him away from his weapon. The corrupt prosecutor collapsed against the wall of the panic room, clutching his wounded shoulder and staring at Aaron with the dawning realization that his carefully planned conspiracy had finally collapsed. "It's over," Aaron said simply, and it was. 6 months later, Aaron stood in the backyard of his new house, a modest 3-bedroom home on the outskirts of Pine Ridge, with a view of the mountains and enough space for the golden retriever puppy that Bella had named Hero. The house wasn't as large as their old one, but it felt more like home than anywhere they'd lived since Sarah's death. "Daddy Hero chewed up my homework again," Bella called from the back porch, holding up the remains of what had once been a math worksheet. "Then I guess you'll have to do it again," Aaron replied, smiling at his daughter's exaggerated sigh of frustration. The last 6 months had been a whirlwind of trials and testimony, federal investigations, and media attention. Webb had pled guilty to corruption charges in exchange for a life sentence instead of the death penalty, and his cooperation had led to the dismantling of a drug trafficking network that had operated across 3 states. Chief Anderson had been promoted to head of a new multi-state task force investigating police corruption, and she'd offered Aaron a position as a federal investigator. He'd turned it down, preferring to focus on being a father and maybe eventually figuring out what he wanted to do with the rest of his life. But he hadn't ruled out the possibility of future cooperation with law enforcement, especially when it involved protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Aaron. The voice belonged to Claire Anderson, who had become a regular visitor since the trials ended. She was standing at the gate to his backyard, no longer in her official police uniform, but wearing jeans and a casual blouse that made her look younger and more approachable. "Claire," Aaron said, surprised by how pleased he was to see her. "I wasn't expecting you today." "I was in the neighborhood," she said, though they both knew Pine Ridge wasn't really on the way to anywhere. "Thought I'd stop by and see how you and Bella were settling in." Bella had spotted their visitor and came running across the yard with Hero bounding beside her. "Chief Anderson, did you come to see my new room?" "I'd love to see your new room," Claire replied, kneeling down to pet the energetic puppy. "And maybe your dad could show me that vegetable garden he's been bragging about." As Bella led Claire into the house, chattering about her new school and her friends, and the swimming lessons she was taking at the community center, Aaron realized that something fundamental had changed in his life. For the first time since Sarah's death, he was thinking about the future instead of just surviving the present. The crisis that had brought violence into their lives had also brought new possibilities, friendship, purpose, and maybe even the chance for love again. That evening, after Bella had gone to bed and Claire had stayed for dinner and helped with the dishes, they sat on the front porch watching the sunset behind the Rocky Mountains. Hero was sprawled across Aaron's feet, exhausted from a day of playing with his new favorite person. "Are you happy?" Claire asked quietly. Aaron considered the question seriously, thinking about everything they'd been through and everything they'd gained and lost along the way. "I'm getting there," he said finally. "For the first time in years, I'm actually getting there." "Good," Claire said, her hand finding his in the gathering darkness. "Because Bella's going to need a father who believes in the future, not just someone who's surviving the past." "What about you?" Aaron asked. "Are you happy?" Claire smiled, and Aaron could see the woman she might have been if her life hadn't been shaped by violence and responsibility and the weight of other people's safety. "I'm getting there too," she said. And as the stars came out over Pine Ridge, Colorado, Aaron Brooks realized that sometimes the best things in life came from the worst circumstances, and that heroes weren't people who never felt fear. They were people who felt fear and chose to act anyway. He'd saved Chief Anderson's life, protected his daughter, and helped bring justice to men who thought they were above the law. But more importantly, he'd learned that love could survive loss, that courage could overcome fear, and that sometimes the most important promise you could make was simply to come home. "Daddy," Bella's voice drifted from her bedroom window. "Yes, baby girl. I love you more than all the stars in the sky." Aaron smiled, squeezing Claire's hand as he called back to his daughter. "I love you too, Bella. Sweet dreams." And for the first time in 3 years, Aaron Brooks went to sleep, believing that tomorrow would be better than today, and that the future was something worth fighting for. The man who had once thought his story was over had discovered that sometimes the best chapters were still waiting to be written.